A divine conversation. 3 days had transpired. Good Friday had come to Resurrection Sunday. The longful event of Easter Sunday was coming to a close. Two disciples leaving Jerusalem headed home. One of the disciples' name was Cleophas. The other is presumed to be his wife. They had turned their backs from Jerusalem and on a 7-mile journey walking westward to Emmaus. But I want us to see a divine conversation had taken place. And I want you to know that this morning there is a divine conversation taking place. Notice verse 15 says, as they walked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked with them. Ever since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, man has been trying to find his way back to God, back to intimacy with God. But what people don't recognize that when you start seeking God, he was seeking you first. The Bible tells us in the book of Hebrews, the first chapter, it says, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, through whom he made the universe. Jesus Christ is God's conversation with man. Jesus Christ is God's conversation with man. Just as Jesus drew near to those two disciples on the Emmaus Road, I want you to know this morning, Jesus draws near to you in your journey. In his walk with these two, the Lord noticed and knew two things about them that are true for you and for me. That they're true unless you know experientially the wonder and the power of the resurrection. I say experientially because there is a huge gap between knowing the story of the resurrection and walking experientially in new life in the power of the resurrection. Verse 15 says that as they walked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. Verse 17 says he asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still their faces downcast. Shaking their head, I can imagine. They were shaking. They were sad because why? Their faith was shaken. I mean, verse 18, one of them named Cleophas asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there in these days? They believed, as many, many others believed. The one who entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. The one who came as prophesied in Zechariah, meek and lowly and riding in on a donkey. They believed that he was the one that was going to redeem Israel. They believed that he would drive out the Romans and restore the kingdom back to Israel the way it was prophesied throughout the Bible. But it didn't happen as they anticipated. Instead, he had been crucified. He had been beaten nearly to death. And they hung him on a cross. And the Bible says, cursed is he who hangs on a tree. This is not the way we thought it was going to turn out. They nailed him to a tree. Their faith was bewildered. This is not the way we thought it was supposed to be. Do you know that right now, even to some extent in here and to those who are watching online, there are those in the church whose faith is shaken. They are bewildered. Religion has failed them. As far as they're concerned, what a lot of Christians say the church should be doing, and they're not doing it. They looked at certain Christians and they go, nah, hypocrite. They looked at certain church leaders and all you see is scandal after scandal after scandal. And your faith is hanging in there. Your faith is shaken. They heard preachers get on TV and in the big churches and some churches, and they say, if you accept Christ in your heart, all your problems will go away. You don't have to be sick anymore. I saw a billboard on one church that says, money cometh. You can name it and claim it, they tell you. And they tried that form of Jesus in a bottle. Or Simon Says, just say it. As if Jesus was some kind of spiritual ATM machine. These two here in Luke. These two here in Luke were sad because their hope was shattered. They had heard Jesus, the prophet, of him who was mighty in word and in deed. And he said to that he even said that, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. They were looking at the material building. But Jesus was talking about his body. They misunderstood. And as far as they were concerned, 3 days had happened and nothing changed. It's not what we anticipated. Their faith was shaken. Their hope was shattered. And what's more, their heart was breaking because they loved Jesus. I mean, they'd seen him moved with compassion. He had a love like no other. They never saw anybody love like this man, Jesus. Oh, he was totally for the underdog. He had mercy. He showed forgiveness to the outcast. He fed the poor. He healed the sick. He touched the untouchable. We even saw him raise the dead. But it's not turning out the way we thought. Come on now. Listen. Listen carefully. On their journey on the road to Emmaus, the one they thought was dead had risen and joined them on their journey. The risen Lord was having a divine conversation with them. And I want you to know that some of us here today who had this anticipation that my faith walk was supposed to be like this, what that preacher told me, it was supposed to be like that, and it ain't happening the way that they said. There's a miscommunication and a misunderstanding because the risen Lord wants to have a divine conversation with you this morning. Today, the Lord wants to discuss your shaken faith. He wants to discuss your doubts. He wants to balance out some of your dreams that you may think are unfulfilled, or the longing that you've had in your heart to be nearer to God, but it's still not satisfied. Verse 25, he said to them, "How foolish you are." But this, I got my theology, I got my doctrine, and this preacher told me I'm supposed to, this is supposed to happen, and that's supposed to happen, and there are many masters of manipulation in our churches today. Yeah, say that. Amen. They will tell you what you want to hear. One of the greatest pastors in our country today, I was listening to him preach, and he was talking about the multitudes of people who go to these great big churches. And he calls some of them out by name, Joel Osteen and some of those kind. And he says, you need to understand something. Y'all focusing on these false preachers. But you need to know that those false preachers are judgment on you. Because all you want to hear is the good stuff. And you won't accept the truth of the whole gospel, so he's going to let you have it. He said to them, "Oh, fool, how foolish you are, and slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken.